The night before my wedding, I woke up to laughter. Not just any laughter, his. The kind that used to make me feel safe, like everything would always be okay. But there was another sound woven into it.
Softer. Teasing.
A woman's laugh I didn't recognize but somehow already feared. At first, I thought maybe I was dreaming. My brain was fried from everything. The rehearsal dinner, last-minute vendor calls, making sure every single detail was perfect. I was marrying Dorian Hale, the man everyone said had it all. Corporate attorney.
Sharp suits.
That smile that made investors write checks and strangers trust him instantly. We were supposed to be the perfect couple, the kind people whispered about at galas. But that laugh pulled me out of bed like a hook in my chest. I slipped out from under the heavy hotel sheets, my bare feet silent on the cold marble floor of our Ritz-Carlton suite. My heart was pounding, but I moved slowly, following the sound down the hallway toward the lounge area. The ice machine hummed somewhere nearby. I could smell perfume, floral, expensive, not mine. That's when I saw them. Dorian, still in his dress shirt from dinner, sleeves rolled up like he'd just come from closing some big deal. And her, sitting way too close. Champagne-colored robe barely tied. Her hand on his collar, fingers playing with the fabric like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Then she turned her head and saw me standing there. It was Lyra, my maid of honor, my best friend. The air went thick.
Wrong.
Like the whole room had been holding its breath, and now we were all suffocating together. I couldn't move.
Couldn't speak.
My mind was trying to catch up to what my eyes already knew. Cass, Dorian said, and his voice was so calm it made my skin crawl. Too smooth. Too practiced. It's not what you think. But I'd already seen enough. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. I stood there for what felt like forever, but was probably only 10 seconds. Lyra's mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Dorian took a step toward me, and I finally found my legs. I turned around and walked back to the bedroom. No screaming. No throwing things. No dramatic scene. Just silence. Because in that moment, standing in that hallway with the sound of the ice machine and her perfume still in my nose, I realized something that changed everything. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't some drunken moment of weakness the night before our wedding. This was planned. I'd introduced them 6 months ago at a charity gala I organized. I'd watched Lyra charm him, touching his arm, laughing at his jokes, and I'd thought nothing of it. I'd been so stupid.
So trusting.
So convinced that the people I loved would never do this to me. But they had. And judging by how comfortable they looked together, they'd been doing it for a while. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my wedding dress hanging on the closet door. White silk.
Custom made.
$10,000 of fabric and dreams. In 12 hours, I was supposed to walk down an aisle in front of 200 people and promise forever to a man who was laughing with my best friend in a hotel robe. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Probably the wedding coordinator with another question. Or my mom asking if I was getting enough sleep. Or one of the bridesmaids wanting to know what time to meet for hair and makeup.
But I just stared at that dress.
And that's when I made my first decision. Quiet.
Clear.
Final. I wasn't going to be humiliated on his stage. I wasn't going to stand there in front of everyone we knew and pretend everything was fine while he married me for show and kept her for real. I wasn't going to let him write this story. It's not what you think, he'd said. But I looked at him, and I thought, it's not what I think. It's what I know. And what I knew was going to cost him everything. Would you still walk down that aisle if you discovered this the night before your wedding? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories like this one. The morning sun came through the balcony like it had no idea my life had just collapsed. I sat there in my robe, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Below me, the hotel staff was setting up the ballroom. White orchids everywhere. String lights being tested. The live orchestra doing sound checks. Everything looked perfect from up here. Like a movie set. But I felt nothing. Just empty.
Hollow.
Like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left behind a shell that looked like Cass but wasn't really her anymore. My phone kept buzzing. The florist confirming delivery. My mom asking what time she should come help me get ready. Friends texting excited messages with way too many heart emojis. The wedding coordinator needing final approval on table assignments. I just watched the city skyline and felt the weight of the ring on my finger. It suddenly felt too tight, like a handcuff. Dorian had tried to come in around 6 in the morning, but I'd locked the bedroom door. He knocked softly, said my name through the wood, used that gentle voice he always used when he wanted something. I didn't answer. Eventually, he left. I heard Lyra's voice in the hallway too, around 7. She was talking to someone on the phone, probably pretending everything was normal. Her laugh floated through the suite, and it made my stomach turn. How many times had I heard that laugh over wine and late-night conversations about life and love and trust? How many secrets had I told her? How many times had she looked me in the eye and lied? The coffee cup trembled in my hand. That's when Tilda knocked on the balcony door. My assistant. She'd been with me for 5 years, helped me build my event planning business from nothing into something people actually respected. She knew me better than almost anyone, which meant she knew that my silence wasn't shock. It was something deeper. Cass, she said softly, sliding the door open. You okay? I looked at her, and for the first time since I'd seen them together, I felt something break loose in my chest. Not tears. Something colder. Something that felt like clarity. Cancel the ceremony, I said. My voice came out steady.
Calm.
Almost businesslike. Send everyone home. Tilda's eyes went wide.
What?
Cass, the guests are all ready. Cancel it. All of it. Tell them there's been a family emergency. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. But I'm not walking down that aisle. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her brain working through all the logistics, all the chaos this would create. But then she just nodded once. Okay, I'll handle it. That's why I loved her. No judgment. No questions. Just action. She left, and I sat there for another 20 minutes, listening to the sounds of my wedding being unmade. Confused voices. Phone calls. The sharp click of heels on marble as people rushed around trying to figure out what was happening. Somewhere in the suite, Dorian was probably panicking.
Good.
I stood up, walked back inside, and started packing. Not everything. Just enough. My laptop. Some clothes. The files I'd brought for final vendor payments. I moved like I was on autopilot, my hands doing things while my brain floated somewhere else. By the time Dorian found me, I was zipping up my suitcase. Cass, wait. He stood in the doorway, still in the same clothes from last night. He looked tired, worried, almost convincing.
We need to talk about this.
You're making a mistake. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized I didn't recognize the man standing there. Maybe I never had. The only mistake I made, I said quietly, was believing you. I walked past him, suitcase in hand, and didn't look back. The hallway felt like it went on forever. Staff members saw me and quickly looked away. A few guests who'd arrived early stood near the elevator, confused, whispering to each other. I kept my head up and kept walking. When I reached the lobby, the manager approached me with a nervous smile. Ms. Hale, the press has arrived early. They're asking about. I didn't let him finish. I just walked straight through the lobby, out the side door, and into the parking garage where I'd left my car. The last thing I heard before I drove away was the distant sound of an orchestra playing a song we'd chosen together. It sounded like a funeral. My old apartment smelled like lavender and dust. I'd kept it as a backup after Dorian convinced me to move into his penthouse downtown. He'd said it was impractical to keep paying rent on a place I never used. But something in me had refused to let it go. Some quiet instinct I didn't understand at the time. Now I understood perfectly. I dropped my suitcase by the door and just stood there, breathing in the familiar smell. Small living room. Kitchen with a leaky faucet I'd never fixed. The couch where I used to fall asleep watching old movies. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe. I made tea, sat on the couch, stared at the blank TV screen. The silence felt good. Safe. Like a blanket I could finally wrap around myself without someone trying to pull it away. Then my phone started exploding. Not just calls, texts, social media notifications, emails, everything at once, like a bomb had gone off and the shrapnel was hitting me in waves. I made the mistake of looking. The headline was already everywhere. Runaway bride cancels $1 million wedding at Ritz-Carlton. Groom left standing at altar. There were photos. Guests leaving the hotel looking confused. The empty ceremony space with all those white orchids and no one to see them. And somehow, already, there was a photo of Dorian looking devastated, running his hand through his hair, surrounded by concerned friends. The comments were brutal. Poor guy. She clearly had a breakdown. Cold feet at the last minute? That's so selfish. I heard she's been under a lot of stress. Maybe she's not stable. Every article used the same words: emotional exhaustion, mental health crisis, sudden breakdown. Like I was some fragile thing that had finally cracked under pressure. And then I saw Dorian's statement. Posted 2 hours ago. Probably written by his PR team. I'm deeply saddened by today's events. I only want what's best for Cass and her well-being. I ask that everyone respect her privacy during this difficult time. I wish her nothing but healing and peace. It was perfect, gracious,
Concerned.
noble. It made him look like the victim and me like the crazy ex who couldn't handle life. And people were eating it up. My hands shook as I scrolled through comment after comment, watching strangers tear apart someone they'd never met. Watching my reputation, my career, my credibility, everything I'd built, get shredded in real time. The worst part? Some of my friends were already choosing sides. I could see it in the carefully worded texts. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. Let me know if you need anything. Translation: I don't know what to believe, so I'm keeping my distance until this blows over. Only a handful of people actually called. My mom, crying and confused. Tilda, asking where I was and if I needed her. My cousin Rachel, furious on my behalf but not knowing why. I didn't answer any of them. Because what was I supposed to say? That I caught my fiancé with my maid of honor the night before our wedding? That I had no proof, no witnesses, just my word against his? That he'd already spun the narrative so perfectly that no one would believe me anyway? I was erased. Quietly. Efficiently. By the man who'd promised to build a life with me. The loneliness hit me like a wave. Not the sad kind, the suffocating kind. The kind that makes you realize you're completely alone and no one's coming to save you. I turned off my phone and sat in the dark apartment, listening to the sound of traffic outside. That's when I noticed the package. It was sitting by the door, half hidden behind my suitcase. Brown manila envelope with my name on it, forwarded from the penthouse address. I almost didn't open it. Almost threw it in the trash, with all the other wedding garbage. But something made me pick it up. Inside was a thick stack of papers. Invoices. Receipts. Vendor contracts. All marked accounts. Ritz wedding. I thought it was just another bill. More proof of how much money I'd wasted on a wedding that never happened. Then I saw the line item on page 3. Private suite. Guest Lyra R. Check-in. 2 days before ceremony. Approved by D. Hale. My heart stopped. Not the night before. 2 days before. This wasn't some last-minute mistake. This wasn't cold feet or a moment of weakness. This was planned, coordinated, deliberate. And suddenly, that empty feeling in my chest turned into something else. Something sharp and clear and burning. They'd been playing me, both of them, for months. I sat there, staring at that single line of text, and felt everything shift. The wedding wasn't just canceled. It was evidence. I spent the next 3 days going through every file I had. Contracts, invoices, email chains, vendor receipts. I'd organized hundreds of high-end events before starting my own business, so I knew exactly what to look for. Patterns, signatures, authorization codes. The little details most people ignore. That's when I started seeing her name everywhere. Approved by LR on catering adjustments. Authorized by Lyra Ross in the event vendor portal. Changes to the seating chart I'd never made. Menu selections I'd never approved. I hadn't given her that access. I was meticulous about my systems. Everything required my direct approval. But somehow, Lyra had been making executive decisions about my wedding for weeks. Dorian must have given her access. Added her as an administrator. Let her play bride while I was busy, actually being one. The more I dug, the sicker I felt. Then I found the file that made my blood run cold. It was buried in the shared cloud drive under Vendor Contracts Final. A PDF labeled Amendment to Service Agreement. My signature was at the bottom. Electronic. Official looking. Except I'd never signed it. I pulled up the original contract I'd actually signed and compared them side by side. Different dates. Different terms. Different payment structures. Someone had forged my signature and replaced the real contract with a fake one. And the metadata didn't lie. The file had been uploaded at 2:17 in the morning, 3 weeks before the wedding. From an IP address I recognized immediately, Dorian's home network. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my laptop. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was fraud. Identity theft. Professional sabotage. They hadn't just been planning to humiliate me emotionally. They'd been systematically undermining my business, my credibility, my legal standing, making it look like I was unstable, unreliable, someone who couldn't even manage her own wedding. And if the wedding had gone through, if I'd married him, he would have had legal access to everything. My company, my accounts, my reputation, everything I'd built. This wasn't love gone wrong. This was a calculated takedown. I sat back, staring at the screen, and felt something I hadn't felt in days. Not sadness. Not anger.
Clarity.
They'd underestimated me. Thought I'd just disappear quietly, let them spin their story, fade into the background like a cautionary tale about stressed-out brides. But I wasn't going to disappear. I was going to bury them. Not with drama. Not with public scenes or social media rants. But with something they'd taught me themselves, evidence. Documentation. The kind of quiet, devastating proof that lawyers and investigators actually care about. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in 3 years. Juno Calder. Digital forensic consultant. The woman who'd helped one of my clients recover from a massive data breach that almost destroyed their company. She was brilliant, ruthless, and completely uninterested in drama.
Perfect.
I sent her a message. Need your help.
Can you talk?
She replied in 30 seconds. Send me the files. No questions. No sympathy. Just action. I uploaded everything to a secure server and hit send. Then I made myself another cup of tea, sat back down on my couch and waited. For weeks, I'd been the victim. The runaway bride. The unstable woman who couldn't handle her own life. But that was about to change. Because Dorian wanted a show? He wanted to control the narrative? Fine. Let's give him one. Juno called me at midnight 2 days later. You need to see this in person, she said. No hello. No small talk. Just straight to business. That's how I knew it was bad. We met at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. The kind of place with sticky tables and coffee that tastes like burnt rubber but stays open when nothing else does. Juno was already in a corner booth when I arrived, laptop open, 3 empty coffee cups scattered around her. She looked up when I sat down, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Anger.
Tell me you didn't know, she said.
Know what? She turned her laptop toward me. The screen was filled with timestamps, file logs, metadata reports. The kind of digital forensics that look like gibberish to most people but told a complete story to someone who knew how to read them. Every forged document, Juno said, tapping the screen, was uploaded from the same IP address. Dorian's home network. Most of them between midnight and 3 in the morning. Sometimes minutes after you logged out of your accounts. She pulled up another window. And here's where it gets interesting. Lyra's name appears in the vendor portal system 53 times over the last 4 months. Approvals. Changes. Messages sent on your behalf. She had full administrative access. My stomach twisted. I never gave her that. I know. But Dorian did. Look at this. She showed me the access logs. Lyra's account had been created by Dorian's admin credentials 6 weeks after I introduced them.
6 weeks.
They'd been planning this since the beginning. But wait, Juno said, and her voice got quieter, darker. It gets worse. She pulled up a series of email drafts saved in a shared folder I didn't even know existed. Messages between Dorian and Lyra discussing vendor choices, guest lists, ceremony timing. Talking about my wedding like they were planning it together. One message made me want to throw up. She'll never notice if we're careful. Just keep her focused on the big picture while we handle the details. Another one from Lyra. This is actually kind of fun. Like we're creating something together. Dorian's response. We are. Just be patient. I couldn't breathe. The diner suddenly felt too small, too hot, too loud. There's more, Juno said gently. She showed me financial records, payment authorizations for that private suite where Lyra stayed. Not just 2 days before the wedding. 5 different occasions over 3 months. All charged to the wedding account. All approved by Dorian using my business credentials. He was using your money, Juno said, to pay for hotel rooms where he was cheating on you. And making it look like you approved everything. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. Cass. Juno's voice cut through the fog. This isn't just betrayal. This is fraud. Identity theft. Possibly embezzlement, depending on how your business accounts are structured. If he'd married you, he would have had legal access to everything. Your company. Your assets. Everything. I looked up at her. What are you saying? I'm saying this wasn't about love. This was a con. And you walked away right before he could finish it. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. All those months of wedding planning. All those late nights when he said he was working but was probably with her. All those times Lyra asked detailed questions about my business, my accounts, my plans. They weren't being supportive. They were gathering information. Can we prove it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Juno smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We can do better than prove it. We can freeze everything until an investigation is complete.
His accounts.
The vendor payments. The wedding funds. All of it.
How?
You file a fraud claim with the hotel's legal department. Submit all this evidence to his firm's ethics board. And we send copies to the relevant financial institutions. They'll have to investigate. And during that investigation, everything stops. She leaned forward. Right now, he's controlling the narrative, making you look unstable while he plays the victim. But the moment this evidence becomes official, that narrative collapses. Because fraud isn't a story you can spin. It's just facts. I sat there, staring at the screen full of evidence, and felt something shift inside me. Not revenge. Not anger.
Power.
For weeks, I'd been voiceless. Erased. Watching my life get rewritten by someone else. But I'd been quiet long enough. Do it, I said. Juno nodded and started typing. This is going to get messy.
Good, I said.
Let it. She looked at me across the table, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I smiled. Because Dorian thought he'd won. Thought he'd controlled every detail, every outcome, every story. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated the woman he tried to erase. If you've ever trusted someone who betrayed you, what did you do? Comment your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories like this.
The next morning, I sent everything. Not dramatically. Not with some big announcement or social media post. Just quiet, methodical documentation sent to the right people who could actually do something about it. Juno helped me format it all into a clean, devastating package. Timestamps showing Dorian editing files at 2 in the morning. Screenshots of Lyra's unauthorized access to my vendor accounts. The forged signatures with metadata, proving they came from his network. Financial records showing he'd used my business credentials to pay for hotel rooms where he was cheating on me. We sent it to 3 places. The Ritz-Carlton's fraud department, Dorian's law firm's ethics board, and the financial institutions that handled the wedding accounts. Then we waited. Juno taught me something important during those days. She said most people think justice has to be loud. Courtroom drama, public callouts, viral posts that destroy someone's reputation overnight. But real justice, the kind that actually sticks, it's quiet. It's paperwork. It's letting the evidence speak for itself to people who have the power to act on it. Silence isn't weakness, she told me over terrible diner coffee. Sometimes it's strategy. So I stayed silent, didn't post anything, didn't respond to the articles calling me unstable, didn't defend myself against the rumors spreading like wildfire online. I just let the wheels turn. And they turned fast. 3 days after we submitted everything, Dorian's work credit card was frozen. I only found out because Tilda told me she'd heard it from someone who worked at his firm. Apparently, he'd tried to use that lunch, and it got declined in front of a client. A week later, the Ritz suspended all payment releases related to our wedding pending a fraud investigation. But the best part? I didn't have to do anything. The institutions did it themselves once they saw the evidence. Because fraud isn't a matter of opinion or he said, she said. It's just facts, numbers, timestamps, digital fingerprints that don't lie. Dorian tried to call me. Not just once, dozens of times. He left voicemails that started out angry, then turned desperate, then shifted to that smooth, manipulative tone he used when he wanted something. Cass, please, we need to talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding. You're making this worse than it needs to be. Let's just sit down and work this out. I know you're hurt, but you're overreacting. This is going to damage both of us. I didn't answer a single one. Then the email started, more formal, carefully worded, probably written by lawyers. We should discuss this matter privately before it escalates further. There may have been some administrative errors that we can clarify. I'm sure we can reach an understanding that benefits everyone involved. Every email was basically the same thing, panic wrapped in professional language. Because the narrative he'd built so carefully, the calm, concerned fiancé dealing with an unstable bride, was starting to crack. You can't spin fraud. You can't charm your way out of forged documents and stolen credentials. The man who'd made a career out of controlling situations suddenly couldn't control this one. And I wasn't helping him, wasn't explaining, wasn't defending, wasn't giving him anything to work with. I was just gone. My mom kept calling, worried and confused. Friends reached out asking what was really going on. Even my business contacts started hearing rumors and wanted to know if everything was okay. I gave them all the same answer. My attorney will handle it. I didn't even have an attorney yet, but saying that shut down every conversation and made it clear I wasn't discussing anything publicly. Lyra, meanwhile, had completely disappeared. Her social media went dark. Her phone number changed. It was like she'd evaporated. Good. Let her hide. I spent those weeks doing something I hadn't done in years. Nothing. I stayed in my small apartment, took walks around the neighborhood, read books I'd been meaning to read, cooked simple meals. I stopped checking social media, stopped reading articles about myself, stopped caring what strangers thought about a story they didn't understand. And something strange happened. The anger started fading. Not because I forgave them, I didn't, but because I realized something important. They hadn't just tried to steal my money or my wedding. They'd tried to steal something bigger. My voice, my story, my ability to define my own life. And by staying quiet, by letting the evidence speak, by refusing to play the game on their terms, I'd taken it all back. Tilda came by one evening with takeout and wine. We sat on my couch, eating pad thai and watching reality TV, and she asked a question I knew was coming. So what now? I looked at her and realized I actually had an answer. Something better. She raised her eyebrow. That's it? Something better? Yeah, I said, smiling. Something better. Because I was done building my life around people who saw me as a supporting character in their story. My phone buzzed. A notification from Juno. They're requesting arbitration. It's happening. The call from Dorian's lawyers came on a Tuesday. Professional, polite, carefully worded request for a meeting to discuss resolution options and avoid unnecessary litigation. Translation: they were panicking. Juno helped me find an actual attorney this time. Her name was Rita Morales, and she specialized in fraud cases and business law. She was sharp, no nonsense, and completely unimpressed by Dorian's reputation. "He's hoping you'll settle quietly," Rita told me during our first meeting. "Make this go away before it damages his career any further. They'll probably offer you money to sign an NDA. And if I don't," she smiled, "then we go to arbitration and put everything on record, which means his firm, the Ritz, and every financial institution involved will have official documentation of what he did. That kind of thing doesn't just disappear." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Let's go to arbitration." Rita nodded like she'd expected that answer. "Good, because between you and me, I really want to watch him try to explain those timestamps." The arbitration was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Neutral location. Private conference room. Just the lawyers, a mediator, and us. Those 2 weeks felt like the longest of my life. Not because I was nervous. I wasn't. The evidence was solid. But because I knew this would be the first time I'd see him since I walked out of that hotel suite. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything. The laughter in the hallway. Lyra's hand on his collar. His calm voice saying, "It's not what you think." The months of planning. The forged signatures. The hotel rooms paid for with my money. But I also thought about something else. How small I'd felt during those weeks after the wedding was canceled. How erased. How powerless. I wasn't that person anymore. When I walked into that arbitration room the next morning, I was ready. Dorian was already there, sitting on the opposite side of the table with 2 lawyers flanking him. He looked different, smaller somehow, less certain. The charm that usually radiated off him like cologne was nowhere to be found. When our eyes met, he tried to smile. That familiar, warm smile that used to make me feel safe. It didn't work anymore. The mediator started with the usual formalities, explaining the process, setting ground rules, confirming everyone understood we were here to reach a resolution. Then Rita opened her laptop and started presenting the evidence. Timestamps showing Dorian accessing my accounts at 2:17 a.m. file modifications. Forged signatures. Lyra's unauthorized access codes created by his admin credentials. The hotel invoices for private suites charged to my business account. She showed it all, methodically, calmly, with zero emotion. The room got quieter with each slide. One of Dorian's lawyers tried to interrupt, suggesting some of this was circumstantial or open to interpretation. Rita just pulled up more evidence. Email drafts between Dorian and Lyra discussing how to keep her focused on the big picture while they handled the details. Messages about making changes she'll never notice. The lawyer shut up. I watched Dorian's face while the evidence played out on the screen. He wasn't looking at Rita or the mediator. He was staring at the table, jaw tight, fingers laced together so hard his knuckles were white. For the first time in our entire relationship, he had nothing to say. The mediator finally broke the silence. "Mr. Hale, would you like to respond to any of this?" Dorian looked up, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not regret, fear. He was actually scared. "I think," he said slowly, "we should discuss settlement options." Just like that. No explanation. No defense. No charming story to make it all go away. Because there was no story that could fix this. Just facts he couldn't deny. Rita glanced at me, and I nodded slightly. "My client is willing to consider settlement," Rita said, "under specific conditions." For the next hour, we hammered out terms. Full reimbursement of all wedding expenses. Compensatory damages for fraud and identity theft. A formal acknowledgement from his firm that their investigation found evidence of ethical violations. But the most important part? No NDA. I wouldn't be silenced. Dorian's lawyers tried to push back on that one. They really wanted me to sign something promising I'd never talk about this publicly. Rita shut them down fast. My client isn't interested in protecting Mr. Hale's reputation. That ship has sailed. Take the deal, or we'll see you in court. The mediator looked at Dorian. "Mr. Hale?" He sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then he nodded once. "We accept." The mediator made notes. "I'll draw up the settlement agreement. You should know, Mr. Hale, that your firm has already made its decision regarding your position there. Dorian's head snapped up. What? They terminated your partnership this morning. It'll be announced internally tomorrow. The room went silent again. I watched him process that information, the full weight of what he'd lost finally hitting him. The job, the reputation, the carefully constructed image of a successful attorney with the perfect life. All of it, gone. And he'd done it to himself. The settlement was finalized 3 days later. I signed the papers in Rita's office, and just like that, it was over. Dorian agreed to pay back every penny I'd spent on the wedding, plus damages that covered the professional sabotage and the nightmare of having my reputation dragged through the mud online. The money wasn't even the important part. The important part was the official record. Documentation proving that he'd committed fraud, forged documents, and systematically tried to destroy my credibility while planning to marry me. That evidence would follow him forever. His firm moved fast, Rita told me as we wrapped up. Once they saw the forensic reports, they didn't want any association with him. He's not just losing his partnership. He's probably going to have trouble getting hired anywhere in corporate law. Good, I said, and I meant it. Rita leaned back in her chair. You know what impressed me most about this case? You didn't try to destroy him publicly. You just let the truth do its job. That takes discipline. I thought about that. About all the times I wanted to post screenshots online, expose him on social media, make sure everyone knew exactly what he'd done. But I hadn't, because revenge that depends on other people believing you is fragile. It can be spun, denied, turned into a she said, he said situation. But evidence? Evidence just is. It doesn't need anyone to believe it. It just exists. What about Lyra? I asked. Rita pulled up something on her computer. She's gone. Left town from what I can tell. No forwarding address. No social media presence. She basically disappeared. Part of me wanted her to face consequences too. But honestly, knowing she had to completely erase herself and start over somewhere else, with no credibility and no connections, felt like enough. She'd tried to steal my life. Now she didn't even have her own. I left Rita's office that afternoon and walked through the city, just wandering with no real destination. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold and orange light. People were heading home from work, grabbing coffee, meeting friends. Normal life, moving forward. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could be part of it again. My phone buzzed. Tilda. So? How'd it go? It's done. I texted back. Good. Because I have an idea I want to run by you. What kind of idea? The kind that helps other people not go through what you just went through. Call me when you get home. I smiled and kept walking. That evening, Tilda came over with a bottle of wine and a laptop full of notes. She'd been thinking about this for weeks, apparently. What if we started something? She said, pulling up a rough business plan. A consulting service. Legal protection for people going through major life transitions. Weddings, divorces, business partnerships. We help them document everything, protect their assets, understand their digital rights. I stared at the screen. You've been planning this? Yeah. Well, watching what happened to you made me realize how many people probably go through similar things and have no idea how to protect themselves. You had event planning experience and forensic help, and you still barely caught it in time. What about everyone else? The idea settled into my chest like something that had always been there, just waiting for me to notice it. We could call it something about reclamation, I said slowly, or advocacy. Tilda grinned. Now you're thinking. We spent the next 3 hours mapping it out. Who we'd help, how we'd structure it, what services we'd offer. By midnight, we had the skeleton of something real, something that turned my nightmare into purpose. I thought about Dorian, probably sitting in his expensive penthouse, watching his career implode because he'd underestimated the woman he tried to erase. I thought about Lyra, hiding somewhere under a new name, starting from zero. And I thought about myself, sitting in my small apartment with my best friend, building something that could actually help people. Quiet justice, I realized, doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like taking your pain and turning it into something that prevents other people from feeling that same pain. That's real power. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you settle or go public? Let's talk in the comments. 6 months later, I passed the Ritz-Carlton on my way to a client meeting. I wasn't avoiding it, wasn't taking different routes or pretending it didn't exist. It was just a building now, a place where something had happened to someone I used to be. There was a wedding that night. I could see it from the street. Soft lights glowing in the ballroom windows. Guests arriving in formal wear. A couple posing by the fountain for photos. The woman in the wedding dress was laughing, and it looked real, genuine. I smiled and kept walking. The advocacy group Tilda and I had started was actually working. We called it Reclaim. Simple, direct, exactly what it was. We helped people protect themselves during major life transitions, taught them about digital security, contract review, asset protection, the kind of practical stuff nobody thinks about until it's too late. Our first client was a woman going through a messy divorce whose ex-husband had been forging her signature on business documents. Sound familiar? We caught it early, documented everything, and helped her freeze the situation before he could do real damage. She cried in our office when it was over. I thought I was going crazy, she said. Everyone kept telling me I was paranoid, but you believe me. That became our tagline, actually. We believe you. Now let's prove it. Word spread quietly. Other women reached out, then men, then small business owners dealing with partnership fraud, people who'd been gaslit into thinking they were overreacting when they were actually being systematically undermined. We helped them document, investigate, protect themselves, and when necessary, we connected them with forensic experts like Juno and attorneys like Rita. The work was hard, emotionally exhausting sometimes, hearing story after story of betrayal and manipulation, but it also felt right, like I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and turned it into something that actually mattered. Dorian's name came up occasionally. I'd hear through industry connections that he was working at a smaller firm now. Nothing like the prestigious partnership he'd lost. No more speaking engagements. No more magazine profiles about rising legal stars. Just regular work. Quiet. Unremarkable. Exactly what he deserved. Lyra stayed gone. Every once in a while I'd search her name out of curiosity, but there was nothing. No social media. No professional presence. She'd burned her entire life to the ground over a man who wasn't even hers. I didn't feel sorry for her, but I also didn't feel angry anymore. Just nothing. She was irrelevant now. My mom asked me once if I ever regretted canceling the wedding. If part of me wondered what would have happened if I had just ignored what I saw and gone through with it. No, I told her without hesitation. That would have been the biggest mistake of my life. But you loved him, she said softly. I loved who I thought he was. That person never existed. She hugged me then, and I realized she finally understood. Tilda and I were working late one Friday when she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Are you happy? I looked around our small office, at the files of people we'd helped, at the vision board on the wall, mapping out our goals for the next year, at the quiet, steady life I'd built from the ashes of the one that had burned down. Yeah, I said, I actually am. Not the fireworks kind of happy, not the Instagram perfect kind. Just a steady, real kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you stand for. The kind that doesn't need anyone else's approval. That night, I went home to my apartment. Still small, still simple, still mine, and ordered takeout. Sat on my couch with bad TV and good food and felt completely at peace. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, my friend told me about Reclaim. I think my business partner has been forging contracts. Can you help? I smiled and texted back. Yes. Send me the details and we'll set up a consultation. Another person who needed help. Another story waiting to be reclaimed. This was my life now. Not perfect, not glamorous, but real, honest, mine. And sometimes that's the best revenge there is. The thing about quiet justice is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need headlines or viral moments or dramatic confrontations. It just works. Steadily, surely, like water wearing down stone, so slow you barely notice, until suddenly the landscape has completely changed. A year after I walked away from that wedding, I was invited to speak at a women's business conference. They wanted me to talk about resilience, building after loss, turning pain into purpose. I almost said no. Public speaking wasn't really my thing, and I didn't love the idea of rehashing the worst period of my life for an audience of strangers. But Tilda convinced me. People need to hear this. Not the dramatic version. The real one. How you didn't fight loud. You just fought smart. So I did it. I stood on that stage in front of 300 women and told them the truth. Not about Dorian specifically. I kept the details vague, protected identities like I always did. But I told them about discovering betrayal, about being erased from your own story, about the moment you realized the people you trusted most were actively working against you. And I told them about the choice I made, not to scream, not to burn everything down publicly, but to document, to gather evidence, to let truth do the heavy lifting. The most dangerous thieves, I said, don't take your money or your things. They take your narrative, your credibility, your voice. And the only way to get it back is to refuse to let them write your story while you're still alive to tell it yourself. The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone. Afterward, dozens of women came up to me with their own stories. Cheating partners who'd sabotaged their careers. Business associates who'd forged signatures. Family members who'd stolen identities. All of them told some version of the same thing. I thought I was the only one. That's when I really understood what Reclaim was about. Not just helping people protect themselves legally and financially, but showing them they weren't crazy, weren't overreacting, weren't alone. I drove home that night thinking about the woman I'd been a year ago, sitting in a hotel suite, hearing laughter that didn't include her, feeling small and powerless and erased. She wouldn't recognize the woman I'd become. And that felt like winning. Months turned into years. Reclaim grew. We hired more consultants, partnered with law firms, developed digital security training programs. It became something bigger than just Tilda and me in a small office. It became a movement. I never did make a public statement about Dorian. Never posted the evidence online. Never wrote the tell-all blog post people kept expecting. Because the truth was already written. In legal filings. In settlement documents, in the official records at his former firm. Anyone who really needed to know could find it. Everyone else could believe whatever story they wanted. I didn't need their validation anymore. Sometimes I still see articles about the Ritz-Carlton runaway bride. When people dig through old internet drama, the comments are always mixed. Some people still think I had a breakdown. Others suspect there's more to the story. I don't correct them. Let them wonder. The people who matter know the truth. One afternoon, I got a message from someone I'd helped 2 years earlier. She'd been dealing with a partner who'd been stealing from their shared business account. We'd helped her document everything and get out safely. Just wanted to let you know, she wrote, I started my own company. It's small, but it's mine. Thank you for showing me that starting over isn't the same as giving up. I read that message 3 times. Because that's what this was all about. Not revenge, not punishment, not even justice in the traditional sense. Just helping people reclaim what was stolen, their stories, their power, their right to define their own lives. That evening, I took a walk through my neighborhood. Same route I'd walked 1,000 times since moving back to my small apartment. Past the cafe where I'd hidden during those early weeks. Past the park where I'd sat and tried to make sense of everything. Except it didn't feel like hiding anymore. It felt like home. My phone buzzed. Tilda, client meeting moved to tomorrow. Want to grab dinner? Yes. Meet me at the usual place. I smiled and kept walking. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold light. Somewhere in this city, Dorian was probably having a completely ordinary day. Maybe wondering occasionally if I ever thought about him. Maybe telling himself some version of events where he wasn't entirely the villain. It didn't matter, because I'd learned something important. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And the opposite of being controlled isn't fighting back loudly. It's walking away quietly and building something so solid, so real, so completely yours that no one can ever take it from you again. That's power. Real, lasting, unshakable power. And sometimes it whispers instead of roars. Sometimes it builds instead of destroys. Sometimes it wins by simply refusing to stay defeated. I chose myself. Every single day since that night in the hotel suite, I'd chosen myself. And that was the most powerful revenge there ever was. If you believe quiet courage is real power, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Share your own experiences in the comments. Your story might inspire someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply choose yourself. Until next time, keep reclaiming your power one quiet victory at a time.